Hello. Episode 43. Today we're debating the larynx position, low or high, Steve? In one word.
All of them.
Oh, so typical.
All of them.
Typical. Sitting on the fence.
So there's going to be a lot of anger on today's show, a lot of aggression.
Probably from you.
Yeah. Is it high? Is it low? Does anyone care? I mean, we do, otherwise we wouldn't be.
You're already hyped, aren't you? I can tell.
But we have some music to kick off, as always. And today we have music from the wonderful Elizabeth.
What's your vibe
on that?
Yeah. Time to think. Do you need more time to think?
No, I've got it. Like fairies and in the forests.
Could be Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, I haven't seen Lord of the Rings, but I mean, I did see it. But
sorry, what? What?
We know the story of Lord of the Rings. We know the story.
Yeah. That was cheap seats, wasn't it, for restricted viewing?
And I'll tell you what you should, if ever the cinemas want to promote restricted viewing, what they should put is, if ever you see a film with restricted viewing, you will never watch the rest of them.
Yeah.
The rest of the series.
In all honesty,
rubbish.
Do you remember it was I next to the actual couple who weren't in restricted viewing?
Yeah.
Because obviously it's just the next C is not restricted. So at times when things were getting a little bit spicy and exciting, not spicy, I mean there's no sex in it, but exciting, I'm like this and I end up with my head on their shoulder like every 2 minutes getting excited.
And I still had the chandelier in my eyes, so that's... Anyway, Elizabeth, fairies, forest, that's what it does for me.
But you can tell like the classical background.
Yep.
But it's bringing it contemporary. It's really cool.
Lovely, yeah, lovely
really
stuff.
Good songwriter. She's been writing with some really cool people as well. Some writers with amazing credentials, like kind of Beyonce type credentials. So I'm hoping, the team around her and all of her contacts are going to be integral to helping her, get the music heard.
Great.
But we'll put the links to that on.
Share notes.
Share notes, yes.
But just for one thing before we get stuck into this epic show about the larynx, we're sat here, time and energy, outwards. What would you like everyone else to do?
To bring it back in.
Yeah, just a bit of give podcast. And take. Yeah.
Review us in a nutshell. So iTunes algorithms, what is it? I don't know. Whatever makes you rank higher. We could do with a few more reviews on iTunes. So preferably 5-star with a bit of text if you like the show.
Don't bother if there's any less.
Yeah, don't. But you can find that. We've set up a link, which is the nakedvocalist.com/iTunes. That will take you to the iTunes page, and it does say leave a review. So if you like the podcast, if you want to help us out and be discovered more, leave us a review, please.
We know how this works. Obviously, text will make it go higher, but 5 stars, just to 5 stars, if that's all you can spare in your day. We know how this works.
That's the
game of
recipro
life.
Thank you.
Larynx.
It is a debate, isn't it? Because I tell you what, if you look on, you speak to teachers, you speak to anyone, it's an argument. But science can help us to rationalise each argument, right?
Yeah.
But why would we want to consider the larynx position?
Yeah, well, I think, considering it, there's been some vocal systems in the past, some which we've been involved with, that have based their entire method around teaching on the larynx position. It's like, you're from that method that that teaches the low larynx.
Yeah.
And, you know, whatever, as you said, if we understand its function and how it affects the sound we want to create, then obviously we're going to have a better idea of whether we should follow a pathway which uses the larynx as the focal point, right? So, why is it important? The larynx is important because the shapes above, the acoustic shapes above the vocal folds will shape and strengthen the sound waves that travel through. And so as the larynx, I'll show you where it is in a second.
Okay.
The larynx will change one of these shapes.
Yes.
So that's why it's really important to us, because it will dictate how it sounds and also how it feels, and also the effect on the vocal fold shaping, as we discussed in the last episode.
With the straw stuff.
With the straw, yeah.
Yep.
So that's why it's massively important.
Cool.
Now, where is it?
It's right here. Men, Adam's apple. Ladies, possibly Adam's apple.
One thing I do with the kids, you just hold your...
Am I being a child now?
Yeah. Put your fingers on your... can you feel the little bubble?
Yes.
Oh, awful child. That's what I'll be thinking in my head if I...
Remember, this is partly promoting your kids' academy as well.
You're a lovely child and you just need some more direction.
Maybe it's your mum and dad's fault.
Yeah.
You know, that you're so horrible. Could be.
I mean,
normally, isn't it?
So, can you swallow for me?
We offended 55-year-olds last week. Now it's parents.
Swallow for me? That's hard after the coffee. What happened when you...
It lifted.
Swallowed? Now can you make a very funny sound? What happened to
Lowered.
it?
That's me being patronised.
It's me being offended.
But that gives you an idea, doesn't it?
Yeah, so...
It lowers when you kind of go like this.
It shows the control we've got over it.
Yeah.
Right. So, as we've got that control, it can go up and it can go down. Why do we care about it going down, and what can we do to make it go down?
Okay, well, like you said, we'll do some demos actually in a bit. Of using those sorts of sounds, but the low larynx, like both larynx positions, have very distinct effects on the voice, which is why they're both victims of their own success, because they can directly offset a situation opposite to its effect, right? So in essence, like larynx lowering could be used, let's just say briefly, stylistically. If you lower the larynx, you elongate the space of the vocal tract, which typically helps it tune to lower frequency harmonics, lower frequency parts of the sound wave that go towards warmth in tone. Particularly the first harmonic, the fundamental, if anybody's interested in that.
Probably not.
There's some depth to be had from a low larynx. So if you're singing classical, particularly if you're a guy who needs like strength but depth in there too, you may use a lowered larynx position, lower than neutral, let's say, lower than its resting state, to generate some warmth in tone. However, there's another couple of reasons why it's been used so well. Like one of those things is pulling chest, right, or taking the chest register too high. Because harmonically, like the harmonics in the voice and the resonance in the voice, depending on how we boost it, it can influence the vocal mechanism, the folds, into a certain setting. Not totally select it, but strongly influence. And if you're in the higher ranges and you use a low larynx, say in the middle of the voice, like in the break or the bridge or above, you'll likely tune to some harmonic energy that will influence your voice towards head voice, falsetto, basically out of chest, right? And so for some people, depending on that situation, that may influence them into a lovely mixed voice. It may influence them even further than that, actually out and out to a falsetto or a head voice or whatever. So for someone who's constantly like yelling up to the top, it's a really great tool for finding the lighter mechanism of the top voice.
Sure.
And just discouraging that.
Just to clarify that there, though, it's very... Every topic we speak about can go into massive depth, can't it?
Yeah.
And you end up going off into formants, harmonics, science, whatever, inertance. But in short there, what he's saying is that for a number of reasons, whether it's because of the acoustic reasons, form and harmonic relationship, or whether it's because of the vocal fold positioning and or muscles used.
Yes.
All of those things, which will be working in all at the same time anyway, by lowering the larynx, we can often offset or change the environment so that if we are over-engaging, we've got an unfavourable form and harmonic relationship, it will
break it.
Yeah. Right.
And it will transfer you out of your habit. So it's really good like that. One of the other habits, as we know, is as you approach the break, you may well be not over-engaging. You might actually be right on the vocal fold setting, but there's a problem in that the larynx is raising with the pitch and it's a bit uncontrolled. This is all to do with a form and harmonic relationship, right? So as the resonance needs to move to another area of your voice, your throat and larynx can have other ideas about that and hang on to it. And again, that's when people are like getting quite like that in the bridge, and then suddenly they end up with a breathy crack on the other side. That's another thing, that if we drop the larynx like that, we kind of force that resonance into where it needs to go. We stop that larynx raising, and we hopefully entrain a larynx position that is fairly stable as someone moves through pitches in a contemporary range. When you're really high or really low, it's different. But for most contemporary ranges, we actually want to break the habit of larynx going with pitch. Larynx going with pitch. We have to break that, and because most of our pitches are going up in contemporary, if we send the larynx in the other direction, we are breaking a habit. We're opposing a habit. Hence why it's been very handy for that in the past for so many singers.
Yeah. And so most people, and it really is a sweeping statement, most people will probably want to jump on board that to begin with, a new singer, because they're likely to be they will likely have those habits that we just spoke about. So using that when you first start out, or if you at any point feel that that kind of thing going on, dropping the larynx will have a dramatic effect on changing that. Mm-hmm. But on from there, and this is where oftentimes problems can set in, is when we use something like a low larynx for a sustained period or past the point in which it's no longer useful.
Yes. Like for finished sounds.
And especially as you do become more experienced and skilled as a singer, the depth in which you need to change certain things, whether it's your tone position, whether it's your larynx, reduces. So if somebody is a contemporary singer and they're having a bit of trouble on a note, and the bit of trouble is this, they don't necessarily have to go to drop it completely to fix it.
Yes.
It's just a very, very minimal change, and by jumping straight out into this extreme sound again, all we're doing is just we're losing the habit, but we're not training in something that's going to help in the long run.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's a really important point to make, that as soon as we get very settled, stable, and are starting to feel more in control of the voice and the larynx, then we can start to, especially genre-specific, contemporary music, we're going to want that to stabilise a tiny bit, and often raise slightly with pitch.
Yes.
As you said, the classical, especially guys, will be looking for that kind of slightly lower situation. But at no point are we saying low larynx is good. Stick with a low larynx.
No,
right?
No, it's right. And you know what happened. You know what happens if anybody's familiar with this scenario. But you're a yeller. You use a low larynx. It helps you get used to getting over your passaggio. You develop this head voice from it. All this sort of stuff. Your voice expands, and your voice kind of reduces intensity, so you kind of stop yelling. It becomes more like no, becomes more like that maybe.
Yep.
You have ideas about adding more volume to that, i.e. achieving a finished sound and a rich sound. But the thing is about a low larynx is it very much influences you out of a chest type setting. So if your idea is to belt and you're maintaining this low larynx, you're going to run into trouble. And I can see why people actually get so bad with this, because what they do is they'll start adding voice to that, like that. They'll strain, and because larynx lowering was the initial strain inhibitor, it's what solved them in the first place, they'll add more of it.
Let's do more.
Let's do more because I'm straining. And it's like, no, you're straining against what that larynx position is offering you, which is head voice.
Yeah.
You're straining your chest into it, and you need less of it.
You want to make a sound that is not that position is incapable of making.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so you're just trying to do other things in order to make it happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you take that principle of being passive as you sing, and you have a vowel like like a yawny combined closed vowel, low larynx, eventually, if you don't do anything to influence that vowel, it'll make you go ooh eventually into that voice, which is nothing like a belt voice, and it's nothing like a Finnish sound. It's not even applicable in a male classical tenor. They're trying to stay away from that as well. So if you stick with that low larynx and you're moving forward, it's a mistake, especially for contemporary Finnish sounds, which just don't sound great like that. They need, like I said, they need to raise, right? So straining from a low larynx is common when you've used it for too long.
Yeah. And so what we're talking about really is when we're at the point where we've used a low larynx to get us out of bad habits, then we can start to look forward and again, it's not about jamming it into your mouth, but it's just about using it optimally for the pitch that we're singing.
Yes.
The level of the larynx.
That's right. And if anything, just having that flexibility where pitch moves and your larynx doesn't necessarily or isn't desperate to move with it, that means like you're much more free to explore pitches in your voice and actually be selective about the vowel shape for that pitch, the desired voice quality. But if you haven't possibly used a low larynx approach in the beginning to break that habit and detach larynx from pitch, then chances are you'll still be stuck with a lack of flexibility.
Absolutely.
Not every case, but 10,000 hours in the studio, I would say, there's quite a lot of evidence to support that, and from people around the world. I just think it carries on too much into the advanced singing state. Yeah,
and if we're looking at acoustic science and how the voice works, if we've got that stable, then we really can start to play with the position of the tongue and the lips, the jaw, in the upper notes of the contemporary range. And that's a lovely place to be.
Yeah.
Once this is stable, just to be able to move these in order to boost some harmonics.
That's a great strategy, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, if your larynx is stable, you can do the adjustments with the other parts of your voice, like you say, lips and tongue, because you can see them. They have like a really good sensory feedback, so you can go like tiny little adjustments. But you try adjusting your larynx by 2 millimeters. Like, it's fucking impossible.
Yeah.
You have to do it. It needs to be more stable so you can do it at the other end of the tube. So,
sure.
But we should really get into a few like demos, right?
Cool.
So why don't we look at a few sounds or a few bits of guidance for singers to start to apply some of these low larynx techniques, or at least just to discover whether they're even helpful.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty straightforward though, isn't it? To be honest with you, it's making this sound. Ooh, 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 and that can often be perceived as ooh or ooh.
Yeah,
right.
This one by accident. Yeah.
But it should just feel. When I watch things like this, it makes me die inside. It should feel easy. But
it will do if you if you give up the reins. Stop interfering with it. It will be normal.
Do not throw loads of air at it.
Yeah.
Ooh, and then take it on some scales. A scale like. Ooh.
Right,
whatever gets you in there, and then you can sustain into some notes, just holding on to pitches. But then you said you would take that into melodies as well. I mean, it's obvious, really. Just can you replicate this feeling on whatever you're singing?
Yeah, and you could use it on anything. Like if I was going to take, say, like Donny Hathaway, like I've been so many places. That's in my sort of more speech-like, slightly raised larynx position, but. Maybe in my training days, I might have just taken that a little bit like, I've been so many places. And it will lighten the load. It will keep it light. It's good to keep the vowel closed sometimes if that helps you to find this place easier. But obviously we're endeavouring to see whether the low larynx approach is helping, but use as little of it as possible because it's not a great long-term strategy, right? So if it's just a little bit of, I've been so many, I've been, whereas I'm normally, I've been so many.
If you're able to do that.
Yeah, if the laryngeal coordination allows you to go,
Yeah.
then you don't necessarily have a problem with the larynx position until very key points in the range, and that strategy is a whole nother strategy of vowel tuning, right? It's passaggio, but this is just talking about tone. So you have to balance, like, sometimes you're a singer, how much of this should I use, or really, how much can I get away with and still sound decent?
Yep.
And there's always been periods in singing, hasn't there, on stage, where it's like, you know, Grapevine.
Yeah.
I know a man.
Yeah.
If I didn't used to do that, I know a man. It didn't used to come out. It used to be an absolute washout.
Yeah. Because you're trying to get that sound.
Yeah. But you just have to back off.
Yeah.
Allow it to take you to that slightly headier place. Again, this is like, if you don't want to take it on stage, don't. You're not ready yet. Just keep it in the practice room. Until, with the help of other exercises as well, that you don't need a low larynx to influence your vocal mechanism towards your head voice, towards a lighter, less modal place.
Sure. And just on the melody thing there, where you said you may not need the extreme sound, this is why, if we are talking scales, why certain vowels will be enough of a job, will do the job enough.
Yes.
So it's early stages. I remember, you know, and I still do use it sometimes. If somebody's in and they're locked up, that E vowel, E, already has a lower first formant. The larynx is already dropped. So that's why that vowel is really good for people that start, and why most teachers will give that to a beginning student.
Yes.
But then keeping that with the E is going to take you so far away from a contemporary sound if that's what you're singing.
Yeah.
So using just the E.
Exactly.
Just using the vowel and raising that larynx a tiny bit is often the next step on from being extreme.
And if you know intuitively anyway, that when people use like sounds like that, a lower jaw is much more preferable. Sure. It kind of really helps that sound to work. And I guess one last point to whack on that is that because of the position of the larynx, really dumb sounds, again, don't really facilitate range. So if you're trying to take that sound up really, really high, again, you're going to be in kind of conflict with what acoustics would actually prefer.
Sure.
So yeah, be aware that some people would really take somebody very high with a low larynx, but again, I just feel that they're going to be fighting the inevitable, which is the larynx raising. And I'm talking like classical females and men and women that are going into the extremes, like above E5 for guys, and above G or F or G5 for females, and then right up into the very top for sopranos or whatever.
Sure.
So yeah, just be aware. It's very much a passaggio sort of thing, isn't it? It's very much a middle contemporary range approach to trying to get a vocal mechanism selected.
Stabilizer. So high larynx.
Yeah, let's move on to high larynx. If we're talking about being exaggerated, we're kind of talking about these kind of sounds, like really kind of bright. Not necessarily, again, the Finnish sound is again, it's another extreme. But the higher larynx sounds in their more tempered forms are more like speech quality, more like this quality, which is great for pop. It's great for contemporary styles, almost all contemporary styles. Obviously, musical theatre and belting has a need for it to be a little bit more pronounced. You know, it's got that kind of sound and often reputation, but musical theatre is changing all the time in terms of style anyway. So that's the reason, or that's kind of the technical application. But you may use a raised larynx if, for instance, someone is using a larynx that's too low, to offset that, to get some brilliance back in the sound, because it kind of tunes into harmonics, higher harmonics that have much different qualities to the one we discussed earlier, which is depth. So you may be tuning into the call of the voice, like, hey, hey, that kind of place for belting, or maybe something brighter than that. So it's a whole nother emotive quality. Also, some of those harmonics are very related to chord closure. And in terms of boosting them, they can engage more of the modal setting, the chest voice setting, if you like. They can encourage more closure, which brings a chest-like sound as well. So that kind of twangy, bright thing, raising the larynx is often a tool for developing someone's voice if it's breathy, if it's weak, if it lacks chest. And we're talking, in that case, very much female voices. That's one of the uses for it.
Yeah, and so just on that, again, if kind of talking advanced, if you're a singer that is running into trouble whilst and as you're working up in pitch and you're feeling like there's too much compression, a squeeze coming in whilst trying to use the high larynx thing, it may suggest that that the coordination hasn't been completely worked out yet. And so it's often good to use that sound, that which some people would refer to as pharyngeal sound. Completely disengaging the TA. I say completely like it's gone, but you know what I'm talking about, like approaching it in a more head voice falsetto type fashion. Coming in from the top, but still utilising that just working down from the top, but utilising that, because then you're tapping into those higher harmonics.
Bringing some closure.
To the folds in a place where they wouldn't normally be for singers who just started out. And disengaging that TA muscle.
That crunch, You know what, we forgot to mention earlier, but in this case, like in those low larynx positions, it's like you're moving the bridge in your voice, or the register transition, to an earlier point in your range. You're trying to, it's going to get you out of chest, not only get you out of it, but get you out of it early. But in the high larynx sort of situation, you're changing that resonant event. You're actually changing it to the other direction, which can be actually, to get a bit of training in the middle part of your voice, which normally cracks. It can be nice to remove the disturbance of where resonance changes, move it up a little bit so you can concentrate on the pitches below it and train them in. Which is another rationale for raising or lowering the larynx, is to move a resonant passaggio to a different position so you can concentrate on other things.
But remember that the passaggio always starts at E4.
And it ends on G4, right?
So, anywho, how could you train that in?
Well, I sang earlier in kind of, my kind of style is very contemporary, I hope. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, you're right.
And it's definitely taken me a while to get very, very stable on the high larynx position, because the high larynx does encourage, or can encourage, boost in harmonics that will encourage a chest-like register at times. So if you're not in control and you don't quite have the coordination, then the high larynx type singer can just bring you into yelling all the time, and it can just make you strain and strain and strain. However, if you've got it kind of down, I've been so many places. It's like very much like R&B and soul and pop or whatever. And that's the kind of sound, but you could use something like nay to get used to it, right? Is that kind of your favoured sort of thing?
I think it is for most teachers, isn't it? It just encourages that situation. And as I said, if we're having trouble with the higher larynx, jump out of the low notes and start in the high, just to experience that feeling without the hassle of trying to coordinate that lower TA as well. So so in terms of training, nays, start high, see if you incorporate a low on scale, and then jump into a song and see if you can feel the same thing in a song.
And hitting vibrato and stuff like that, it's always a good test, isn't it, for those things? Because if there's any conflict in there, vibrato is usually affected, either too slow, too bleaty, or completely erased. But being able to successfully let the larynx raise with less effort is a major skill for belting, so we don't want to be jacking our larynx like, I'm in belt posture now. That's not what it's about, because belting is about boosting a particular harmonic, and on every pitch that harmonic has its own position. So you can't just be wholesale up for a belt, it's actually much more dynamic than that.
Absolutely.
And there are ways to let the larynx lift and let it link to certain acoustic situations very helpfully, which takes a lot less effort. But it also brings brilliance to the sound. You can really pierce through the acoustics of things. You know, like a lot of the rock singers back in the day, you know, you had microphones and you needed like this wild high rasp just to cut through all of those instruments that suddenly had electric currents, like guitars. Yeah. You know, they all got electrified. So it was nice to have that kind of early rock sound that really just really stood out in the music and the genre. Which was kind of cool. So it does have its uses. Obviously, you know, everyone talks about Ethel Merman and, you know, her brassy belt position of narrowness and high larynx to be able to be heard in the theatre. You know, so it was a resonant strategy back in 1920, whatever it was. I can't remember. To this day. So, but it is preferable for contemporary. So we just have to get used to it. It can come with tensions, like lowering the larynx is a good way of offsetting using a high larynx a lot. It's like warming down from it. It's like you've done a load of bicep curls, which is like twang. Now you need to stretch it out with some tricep, you know, whatever. It's a bit like that with low larynx positions. They can be a bit, low larynx eventually becomes therapeutic, but not wholesale. But that neutral to raised larynx position is usually the kind of adopted contemporary position. So we got to get there eventually, right? Yeah,
work towards it slowly.
Yeah,
patiently.
Yeah.
So that's it, really, in a nutshell. High larynx, low larynx. The choice is yours. Well, it's kind of not there, is it?
No.
It's kind of the choice is yours if you're in a place where you can choose.
And you know, the good supplement to this episode is the tongue position one.
Yeah.
Because in the tongue position one, we talk about like the tongue can depress the larynx or push down to lower the larynx, and we don't want that as a larynx lowering strategy. And same like we said in that one, if the larynx is raised, typically we're forced into more closed vowels, more forward tongue vowels, which we also explain in the tongue positioning episode.
So check it out.
So check
out the tongue. Check out the tongue. Check out the larynx. It's all encompassing here. Now finish up.
We have a question.
Yeah, we do.
And this question was actually asked of me in person by a listener of the podcast at a conference I was presenting at. He's a function singer. His name is Ian Marks. Great guy. Helps out with the Songwriting Academy. He's a function singer. He always sings high songs, right? All of them are belters, like the Bruno Mars stuff, the rock and roll, Sex on Fire, whatever. He said, "How do I get my low notes back? Because after I've sang, I struggle to get back down." What's your opinion on that?
High notes, singing up there for a long time. I mean, there is the case, without knowing, there is obviously a case for singing in the high notes for a long time will be creating postures, vocal fold, positions, using CT muscle, maybe some imbalances there. Between the CT and the TA.
And that's between CT being more of a head voice dominant, TA being more of a chest voice dominant, and singing so high, you're saying he may be just going too far towards a lighter voice of the CT.
Yeah, just creating an environment that helps those notes. But as we know, it may not be efficient for the low notes. So if we spend a lot of time up there, there's a good chance, it's obvious, I'm really good at doing that. Not so good at doing that anymore.
At thickening back up.
Which is what, you know, when people come and say, I want to work on my whistle tone. You know, same thing. It's like, cool. If you want to be really good at that, oftentimes you see that the lower, the transition even, the passaggio is a mess.
Yeah, it goes.
Because I spent so much time using the instrument to do that when actually, you know, there's some freaks out there that can do it all, but not often. So yeah, that just imbalance of, I've been doing this, now I need to come back and do this. So some more time spent, exercises that will engage the TA, and living in the low notes.
Yeah.
Rebalancing, I think would be a good strategy. Exercises, we could list them on the share notes, but essentially it's diving in from the bottom just into the for a guy, we're talking around the kind of G4 downwards area.
Okay.
Anything but starting in the low notes.
Right, and what kind of vowels? What do you reckon?
I mean, if we're starting low, engaging the TA, anything that's kind of wide, na, ga, on any scale that just stays in the low notes. And then as you work up, again, that might offer some problems jumping into the G, like ga, 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 ga. It might give you a few problems. So then just manipulating that vowel a tiny bit, gug, 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 just to experience the TA in the low notes, and then see if we can utilise it if we start to work a little bit higher. But in short, it's exercising in the place where he's not singing.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
And most singers are upside down to that, aren't they?
Yeah.
It's like they do chest voice really well, they do that thick vocal fold setting so well, and they can't thin it out. But singers who end up getting the other way around after a bit of training or just naturally sing high, they become like top heavy.
Sure.
Like really great at like this mixed voice, but when it comes down low enough to that modal register, the thickness is just not being returned.
Sure.
So in that case, still semi-occluded vocal tract, straw, even hung is a really great one, because that can bring some squareness back to the vocal folds, get that train back in. But also, you know, when you sing really high, and especially if you're being belty, you're going to need to adopt a high larynx position, possibly even an extremely high larynx position. Still not wrong, but if when you come down, that larynx position remains where it is, you can be quite thin in tone. So trying to trying to get some low notes back with a low larynx possibly, to see if that actually brings back more space for resonation and more richness back to the voice, and then you might feel that chest voice is back. But the other thing we can't rule out for high intensity singing is possible damage, right?
Yeah.
And we're not saying serious, but
No, but I mean, if you're singing high for a long time, we have got more tension than in other places, and also more oscillations per second, so which just means more contact. So then you've got the potential for more abrasion, more swelling, inflammation, and therefore when we come back down and we need to oscillate freely, those thick little inflamed folds might not be up for doing the job, which then you get breathiness. You don't get
hoarseness even.
Yeah. So there's that to consider.
Which would be, and you know what, that we mentioned it in the last one, but you have to, if there's inflammation, warm down is crucial.
Yeah.
Semi-occluded warm downs can dissipate that for the next day.
Yeah.
Better than just resting, and definitely better than more singing or talking. So let's hope that that can be part of the strategy, that the warm down, like we said, to summarise, the warm down could be get yourself back in the low notes, see if you can bring that larynx position maybe back from being really, really high, reduce tension and reduce inflammation through a bit of that stuff. And if you don't have straws, then ums or ungs or something closed.
If you don't have straws, get some.
Yeah. So I hope that helps, Ian. You have to let us know. It's going to need to be about a 10-minute thing after every gig, isn't it, really?
Sure. Yeah, and the consistency would be good, and if you let us know if you do it a few times and see if it starts to come back in, that would be good to hear.
Yes.
So that's it for today.
It's been fun, mate.
Has it?
Yeah. Oh, right. I thought that was consensus, but okay. A few years on the road. Hello.
Too long, baby. Too long. We'll see you. iTunes review if you could. Let's make sure we do that.
/iTunes.
And give us a 5-star, because that'd be really helpful. Love you. And we'll look forward to seeing you when you see us
on this.
in a few.
That.
And
that.
Cheers.
Bye.